SkillStruct presents.
Hey everyone, Michael from SkillStruct here, and I'm really excited to introduce this brand new concept for us called the Programmer's Playbook. And so how it works is each playbook will be corresponding to a program. So it could be on Python, SQL, Java. This particular one is about C#, and each video will be a corresponding chapter. So for this particular video, this is a C# playbook on the basic and fundamentals. And we can expand, this playbook with different chapters. So we might, focus on the fundamentals now, but then maybe we'll expand it for, other useful information like the solid principles for C#, et cetera, et cetera. You let us know, what kind of chapters you want next after this particular one, or if you want a playbook on Python or SQL, let us know that equally. But focusing on this video, you might be wondering, why a playbook? What's the idea? What's the concept of a playbook? And for me personally, as someone that, founded SkillStruct on the sort of fundamentals of, skill and structure, we like ways of getting people to get started with programming as soon as possible, but also we don't want to, leave them there on the lurch. We want to give them some guidance. And so we'll give some theory here, but also ways to, be practical as well. And also give challenges as well as we continue this particular playbook series, where each time we reach a milestone within a chapter, we'll give you a challenge to do so you can actually extend your learning. And we're quite interactive in the comment section. So if you do, carry on challenges that we set you and you do them, feel free to reach out, write a comment. I'm sure, me or someone in the team will reach out as well, just to give you some encouragement as well, or even people of the community. Our members alike are really interactive as well and like to support people and pay it forward. So if there's anything you want to let us know about this particular playbook concept, then please do let us know. You might be thinking, why C#? Well, I mean, C# is a demand skill. You look at any respected websites on these sort of things, you'll often see C# in the top 5. Goes to show it's a demand skill. I've been a C# developer for about 7 or 8 years. And I know that for me personally, I've always seen opportunities within the .NET sector. So it's a really booming sector. So for those thinking about an industry worth getting into, there's many programming avenues, but C# is one of those avenues you can rest assured. If you do become a C# developer, you will find opportunities. It's highly versatile. So with the shift in management, when Satya took over Microsoft as a CEO, it's really been emphasized at the Microsoft organization, open source, meaning you can use, .NET programs with .NET Core on Linux, and you can use it on Mac as well. And this series, we're going to be assuming that there will be Mac users and Linux users in particular, as well as obviously Windows users as well for this series in particular. So rest assured, anyone with a decent OS should be able to follow along with this tutorial. Another reason why you want to get into C# is because it's a high-level language, meaning that it's easy to understand and read. There's loads of low-level languages, which I often don't recommend beginners to get started with. And so C# is one of those that is easy to read. It's understandable from that point of view. So it's very, 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 appealing for those who are looking to get started with a language. Same as Python, Java, and other languages alike. Very high level, so very easy to read. It's also statically typed. And so often a lot of people ask me about the difference between the two, dynamic and static typed. With static typed languages, they normally have some rules, really. So it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you accountable and that sort of thing, meaning that it gives you more structure. And as a beginner, and especially for me, running an organization called SkillStruct, or SkillStruct really, but the struct part of it is about structure, right? And so as I'm talking to new programmers and beginners and people going to the beginning of their journey, I often say having a good structure base is a good starting block. And so with programming, it's no different, right? And so that's a good appeal of why you should potentially get started with C#. So what's included in this particular chapter, we're going to be taking it a little bit back, giving you a little bit of a history lesson. Don't worry, I know we're not here to learn history, we're here to program, but anyone who knows me knows I like to explain things by talking about history. I'm a little bit of a history buff, not too tough, but hey. So we're going to talk about how C# became C# a little bit. We're also going to be talking about what's under the hood in terms of how programmers are able to program with C#. So talking about Visual Studio, and we're going to explain Visual Studio pretty soon, so don't worry about that. We're also going to be talking about key concepts such as CLR, debugger. We're going to talk about loads of cool concepts like that. We're also going to be talking about fundamental concepts within C#, such as object-oriented, what that means exactly. We're going to be talking about things like properties, value types, reference types, variables. I mean, the list goes on and on. We're also going to be talking about fundamental programming concepts such as control flow, so branching, switching. We're going to be talking about loads of things. So I don't want to give the game away too much. So just understand we're going to be doing lots of really cool things within this chapter. So stay tuned. Let's get started. Actually, before we get started, one little thing I need to let you know. All right, so two main things I want to let you know. One, at the time of this recording, we used a platform called Visual Studio Community Edition 2019 to make this recording. Since then, and since now, as I'm recording this, 2022 edition, the next version up has come out, but don't worry, we have tested it out on our side, and you should be able to follow along with this tutorial quite seamlessly without any issues. Any issues, do let us know in the comment section. Either myself or the team will be happy to help. Also, I should let you know as well, within this particular chapter, if there are anything that we catch before we upload this video, we will embed videos in here just to help and support you as you go on with this tutorial. So don't worry, again, there is a newer version of this edition. There's always going to be the new edition, right? But as for the latest version at this moment in time, 2022, you should be able to follow along, even though we are using 2019 for this tutorial. We might be referencing 2019 here and there, but you should be able to follow along using 2022. So hopefully that's clear. That's the first point. The second point is you might see references of our old website in this particular chapter. We have since then made some really cool changes to our website. So one, I do encourage you to check out www.skillstruct.com to see those changes. And two, just to let you know, just in case you do see our website, it's slightly different from what you see in the chapters. Don't worry, it's just because we're always looking to create a product that's always improving for you lot's benefit. Okay, so enough talking, let's get into this playbook.
So what is C#? C# is a general purpose programming language based on objects and object-oriented programming disciplines. And we're going to talk about those programming disciplines when we talk about the solid principles, what we mean by objects, as it's in brackets, is classes, and all of these terminologies and things will make sense as we go through this course, but I feel it's important just to get an idea of what is C#. So very dependent on the concept of objects, and you'll see how important that concept is throughout this course. Things and concepts will all align quite nicely as we go through this course. So don't worry now if you're a bit confused as to what C# is still. All of this will make sense as we continue with this course. So what is an IDE? An IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, is a software application needed for programmers to develop software. An IDE normally consists of at least a source code editor, build tools, and a debugger. And don't worry about words like source code editor and debugger. These will become certainly clearer as we go through this course. Just understand IDEs are tools, programs that we use as programmers to actually create software. So when we talk about an IDE, one example of that being Visual Studio, which we'll be using to create these C# programs, is one. If you've used other programming languages like Java, maybe NetBeans is familiar with you, or Python for Python developers. Of course, you can use VS Code too, but these are some of the examples of what IDEs are. So hopefully you get an understanding now of what an IDE is. Let's go on to talk about the setup and things like that needed in order to get started creating these programs. Okay, so the IDE that we're going to be using for this C# course is Visual Studio. And these are our setup recommendations. If you're a Windows user like myself, I recommend 8 GB of RAM and 20 GB of storage to feel comfortable. If you have 4 GB of RAM and maybe 10 GB plus of storage, that should serve you well, but our recommendations is 8 GB of RAM and 20 GB of storage. On the converse, if you are a Linux user or a Mac user, we recommend 4 GB of RAM and 15 gigs worth of storage. If you don't know how to find this out, a simple Google search, how can I check for Windows, the RAM and storage, or how can I check for Linux, the RAM and storage. I'm sure you'll be able to find loads of examples of how to do that. But yes, this is our recommendations, our guide. Now let's actually install Visual Studio. The version that we're going for is the Community Edition. This is the free edition that Windows, or Microsoft should I say, have gifted us. And so let's go ahead and install that IDE. Okay, so let's go ahead and install Visual Studio and that edition Community. So the version or the year that we want is 2019. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the browser. Depending on what browser you're using, it might not rank first. I'm using Edge and I can see it here clearly first. So just to make sure you're well on the same page, you want to make sure you're at www.visualstudio.microsoft.com/vs/community. I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. So you can see it's taken us to the Visual Studio page, where if you want, you can have a read on all the great tooling and all the great things that come with actually having Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and actually just click on download Visual Studio. Depending on your browser, it might prompt you to just run the executable. For me, that's using Edge. It's asking me to open the file. So I've clicked on open file. It will probably ask me for my permission if I want to go ahead with this. I'm going to go ahead and click on yes. So now it's prompted the installer. So how Visual Studio works is it actually first installs an installer, which is a centralized place for all IDEs of Visual Studio to be installed. And so I'm going to click on continue so we can install the installer to actually install Visual Studio Community. This might take a couple minutes or so, or a bit less. We'll see how it goes. So all that's doing now is downloading the installer and installing the installer on our machine. It's now finished and getting everything ready. Let's give it a few moments. And if you weren't able to follow along, feel free to go ahead and rewind just to see you haven't missed anything, you haven't clicked on the wrong link, for example. Okay, so hopefully if we're on the same page, you've have seen installing Visual Studio Community here at the top, and the version here at the moment is 16.11.1. Of course, if you're watching this in the future, some of these things might have changed. Maybe 2022's come out, maybe there's a different version. So don't be too alarmed. As long as generally it looks the same, there shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so now we're here at the installer. I'm just going to go ahead and click on install. And what it's doing, it's going to install it at this location. You're free to change that. I'm going to just leave that now and just go ahead and click on install. I'm going to continue with our workloads. So all of these workloads are installations and features that come with Visual Studio. I'm not going to do that just yet, just because I want you to share that experience of trying to do as many things from scratch as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on continue. And so what that's going to do now is download Visual Studio Community 2019. I'm not sure how long this is actually going to take, so I'm probably going to take a pause on this particular video and circle back once everything has been downloaded. Okay, so we're back again and we've just installed Visual Studio Community. There are other versions available. You might be following along with Professional Enterprise, which is fine. It's a bit more extensive and expensive, so we don't need that for this particular course. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the install section and focus on Visual Studio Community. I'm going to go ahead and click on launch. But before I do that, actually, if you had any issues with installing Visual Studio Community, it might be worth repairing or uninstalling and reinstalling and just following along with this video again, just to make sure you haven't missed out on anything. I'm going to go ahead and click on launch. Because this is the first time we're using it, there might be some setup things that you might have to do, like signing in. I might leave that to a little bit later. I just wanted to show you the screen. So you might not be familiar with this environment setup. Now it's asking me for the theme. I can go for blue, I can go for a lighter version, or blue extra contrast version. I'm going to focus on the dark one. For me personally, it's a lot easier on the eye, and when you've been developing for years, anything that can help you with eye sensitivity or just making it like eye friendly so it's not as strenuous, it's fine. Obviously the other ones are a bit more brighter. No problem if you want to go ahead and use the other ones. I'm going to focus on the dark version. I'm going to click on Start Visual Studio. Now it's preparing for my first time use. This might take a few minutes as it says. Okay, so now we have this box, and this is the default box. As soon as you click on the IDE, you can either click on a recent project, and we'll go into that in a future segment, or you can clone a repository, open a solution, open a local folder, or go ahead and create a new project. I'm just going to go ahead and continue without code. I want you to get that experience of seeing everything from scratch as much as possible. And now we are at the IDE. I'm going to show you a little bit of a tour next. Okay, so welcome to this very brief Visual Studio IDE tour. I just wanted to give you a chance to have a look at some key things before we actually create our first program. So I'm going to exit this. I'm going to exit this too, so we can do this from scratch. So if you want to get access to all these different views and things like that, you literally just click on the view button here. You've got the Solution Explorer. You've got the Git changes that we just exited previously. But I'm actually going to start with output. So output is a very important dialog box for all programmers. This is what actually happens and shows you a running dialog of everything that you've built, everything that you're running, etc., etc. This is where you can actually see the CLR. So the Common Language Runtime, also known as the CLR, is the virtual machine component of .NET Framework that manages the execution of .NET programs like C#. Just-in-time compilation, aka the compiler, converts that managed code into machine instructions, which are then executed on the CPU of the computer. And CPU is the central processing unit of a computer. So everything that you do on a computer, from reading things, seeing things, clicking on things, is all executed by the central processing unit of the motherboard. This is obviously out of scope, so I won't go into too much detail on that, but I just wanted to explain the CLR. If you imagine the source code on the screen, so typical code that you might see, the computer can't actually understand that because it's not in machine language. The CLR manages the process of converting that into machine language so the computer can actually run the program. So that's it in terms of the CLR. I appreciate this might go over your head, but if you want to do some further reading, you can do, but I feel it's important to get a bit of context into what is the CLR. And the debugger. The debugger is a computer program used by IDEs to test and investigate code. So you'll often see with IDEs an error list which shows all the compilation errors that you have currently in your program. That's part of the debugger's work. Also, when you run the solution, you'll also see things in the output window from the debugger as it's checking, verifying your code is working correctly. So that's what the debugger is. That's the tool that we have in many IDEs, most IDEs, including Visual Studio. So it's a very important window. It gives you some good insights to what's happening with your program. So a very important box that I'm sure you'll definitely get familiar with over your programming journey. Okay, what else do I want to show you? I also want to show you the error list. So as we were talking about the debugger before, this is where you can actually see some of those errors that the debugger has found. So you'll see an error list here, and you may be spending a lot of time here just trying to debug things and find out what's going on. Why are these errors here? You know, trust me, as a developer for many years, this is something I still quite often do. And hey, don't be too alarmed if you see loads of errors. As your experience develops, you feel more and more comfortable with errors and being able to resolve them. What else do I want to show you? Okay, so now I will show you the Solution Explorer. So this is where the project or the program where you can access and see the solution in its entirety. So the project, the classes, etc., all of that you'll be able to see here in the Solution Explorer. I think that's all the main core things. Just one cool thing that I really like about programming in general is the extensions that you get, and Visual Studio is no different. You might have seen this in other IDEs. So one cool thing is, as you begin your development journey, there might be third-party tools you want to use. This is one way to access it through the extensions. There's a lot of free tools. There's some that you have to pay for. So where you see this trial, that is something you have to ultimately pay for in the end. But there's a lot of great free tools out there. So if you're into testing, we've got NUnit. If you like bootstrapping as well, that's fine too. You've got a nice little snippet here. I won't bore you with all the other snippets, but it's just great to see all the things here. So these are all created by developers and organizations that are really looking to help people and programmers specifically on their development journey. So I just really wanted to show you that because it's really cool. We might not get time to add extensions during this course, but as you develop yourself and take what you've learned from this forward, you can certainly do things like adding extensions to your programs. But yes, that's all I want to show you for now. Let's start programming. Let's create our first hello world. Okay, so in order to create a new program, we're going to actually need to create a new project. And we do that by going to File, clicking on New, and then Project. If you're into keyboard shortcuts, you can also do Control, then Shift, then N in that order. I'm going to click on Project now. And now we've got this Create a New Project dialog box with some options here. And so if I look here at all languages, these are different languages you can use Visual Studio for. We're going to go ahead and select C#. There's also all platforms, so different platforms, like if you're into mobile development, maybe you want to create something in Android or iOS or the cloud with Azure. I'm going to focus on all platforms just because it's not really too important for this, and all project types. So I'm actually going to choose console, but you do have other options if you want to do things in the cloud, or if you want to do things in the web, you can also select that as well. I'm going to focus on console because that's all we really need for this course. And now, I was going to click on next, but we can't. Perhaps we need more installations and features. There are two ways to do this. You can first of all click on that. If you still haven't closed the original installer program like this, it might complain that one's already open. So we're going to do it this way. In order to actually add more tools, I'm going to go ahead and click on Modify. And this will open up that same dialog we saw a bit of a while back, where if you remember from a few segments ago where I actually didn't select workloads, we now need a workload in order to create a program. Okay, so I'm going to select this one. This is probably the one that has the less amount of storage. You can select other ones like ASP.NET Web Development or any other development one really, because it has the fundamental development tools needed. I'm going to go ahead and install the desktop development because this is all we need. Whoa, quick pause. This is one of those post edits. I just realized you may not have this component already on your machine. As a .NET developer, I already have this, but just in case, let's be on the safe side. If you go and click on individual components, make sure you look for .NET Core 3.1 or above. So at the moment, I'm using 3.1. There might be newer versions at the time that you're watching this. So make sure you select .NET Core 3.1 or above, and then click on Modify. Okay, back to the video. Peace. I'm going to click on Modify now. Now it's prompting me, am I sure I want to go ahead with this? I'm going to go ahead and click on Yes. And now it's actually adding everything that we do need. It might ask me to exit Visual Studio like it has done. I'm going to go ahead and click on Continue. Now what that's done is actually closed down Visual Studio Installer. This is going to take, I'm not sure, maybe a few minutes. So I won't actually just watch it play out the whole time. I'm actually going to take a pause on this video and circle back once this is done. Okay, so we're back again, and hopefully now the .NET Desktop Development feature has been installed. I'm going to double check that by clicking on Modify. And now as I open this up, hopefully there's a check mark against the .NET Desktop Development feature. I can see that has been check marked here, which means it's already been installed. And we can see some of that here on the right where it's installed. So the .NET Development Tools and the just-in-time debugger, just to pick a few key things there. So now I'm satisfied that everything is here and we're good to go. I'm going to click on Close. I'm going to click on Launch so we can kick off and open the IDE. All right, so we're back at this familiar screen. I'm going to go ahead and continue without code. And now we're back at the IDE. I'm now going to go ahead and see if we can create a new program. And so in order to create a new program, we're going to create a new project. So I'm going to File, New, and Project. Okay, so now we're back at that normal create a new project dialog. You can see that Visual Studio have cleverly cached our previous options. And we actually now know that for sure it was a success adding those features, because we now have two ways to create a console application. The main difference, as you can maybe notice, is one, you can use if you are a Linux and a Microsoft or Mac user, and the other one you can't use. And so the key thing here is you see this .NET framework here, that's often associated with Windows and is a lot more extensive. The .NET Core framework you can see here actually comes from the .NET framework. So it's actually a subset or a subversion of the .NET framework. And it's a lot more free and lightweight and all of that good stuff, which pretty much suits what we're doing anyway. We don't need too much, and the scope of this course only allows us to do so much. So we're going to focus on the first one. I'm going to also select console application here. We want to make sure if you're following along with us, you're selecting the one that has the Linux, Mac OS, or the .NET Core outlined in the description as well, just to be all inclusive. I want to make sure everyone is doing the same thing here and doing it from the perspective of everyone having a chance to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next. All right, so now it's asking me to pick a project name, asking me where I want this to be stored, the location, and what the solution name is. The convention typically is the project name and the solution name is the same. So I'm going to keep with that convention. And the console application name, I'm going to give it, or the project name, should I say, is Hello World, because we're going to create an application that ultimately just prints out the words Hello World. So that's going to be the first program that we do create. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on next. And now it's asking me for the target framework. So what that means is, what version do I want? I'm going to keep to this one because it's the latest and most stablest version. You do have versions like .NET 5 that's current and the most latest version, but because it's not long-term support, I'm probably going to not choose that one. You can go ahead and choose that if you want. That should be relatively safe, but I'm going to go ahead and pick on .NET Core 3.1 because of this recording, it's the most long-term stable version. Hey everyone, post-edit Mike again. Just a quick update. With the release now of .NET 6.0, since the recording of this video, all users should now be using .NET 6.0. Finally, Microsoft have combined all the capabilities of .NET Core into its .NET framework. So that means now .NET 6.0 onwards should now be used as the standard recommended framework. Also, please ensure that you have checked do not use the top level statements to keep in line with this video. Obviously, with the release of .NET 6.0, there's a few cosmetic changes. So making sure that it's checked, which it isn't by default, will allow you to keep in line with the video and make sure you can follow along. Make sure you do this for future projects that we're working on. So every time you open a new project, make sure that is checked. Once again, use 6.0 onwards and make sure the checkbox do not use top level statements to keep in line with this video is also checked. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create, and what this does is going to create the infrastructure needed in order to create that console application and create that Hello World program. So after giving a few moments, it should now give me the infrastructure I need to create the Hello World program. And as you can see on the right, you've got the Solution Explorer, which shows the project here. So you've got the name, Hello World, you've got the class program here, and to the left, this is what we call the source code editor. So this is where we write the code that we need in order to do what we want. You can see a few things here. So you can see, in fact, what I'm going to do is remove this line because this is essentially what we want to do from scratch. You can see here, notice that using system was grayed out. That's because we removed that line before. And using system is basically a class itself, which has a lot of commands and behaviors that we need to actually do things like create if statements, to use that console.write line that we're going to do in a second, and a lot more other things. We also have the name of the project, which is the namespace as well. This keeps everything tidy. We have the class name program, which is pretty standard. And we have this function called main, which is the main function, of course. And inside these little brackets here, this is where we write what we want the behavior of our program to do. So I'm going to now kick off and write the words console. Okay, so I'm going to now, and what this is IntelliSense. So as we start typing, it's going to say, do you mean this? Do you want this? I actually want the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and select that by going on tab, clicking on tab, shall I say. I'm going to click on the period or the full stop and I'm going to write the words right line. And what this is going to do is as I type right, it's going to filter to what I need. So I'm going to select the second one, right line. And once again, once I've selected it, go on to tab. I'm going to open the function up by, shift and 9 for me, but that open bracket. And you can see here what has happened is it's giving you more help. So it's explaining what you can do here. So you can leave it as blank if you want or pass in a Boolean, which is true or false, and other things like characters, character arrays, decimals, doubles, floats. And we're going to talk about integers, value types, reference types soon. But what we actually want is a string value. And in order to do a string, or write a string, should I say, I'm going to do shift 2. And that will basically give us the quotation, the double quotes needed to write a string. And a string is just anything from words to, you can actually have random sentences here as well. So anything string related can be written here. So I'm going to write hello world here. Okay, so hello world is one thing. And of course, like I said, you can write anything you want. It can be gibberish. It will just print out anything that you put in there. Or you can even put SkillStruct rocks. There we go. All right. I'm going to focus back onto hello world, and that's what we're going to write. Hello world. And you might have noticed this debugger and this error list is actually complaining that we're missing a semicolon. So you can see straight away the debugger's at work. It's noticed, hey, we can't run this until all the errors are solved. And this is one big error, the semicolon. So of course, going to include the semicolon. I'm going to do that now. And hey, presto, the error has disappeared. And now we are good to go to actually run the solution. So that's what we're going to try and do next. Okay, so before I do anything, I'm going to make sure I save this by doing Control S. And now that's done, I'm going to actually, before I click on this button, which will run this in debug mode, I'm going to first build a solution, which will essentially create the all-important DLL the CLR needs to actually convert this into machine readable language. I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to go into detail on that again. All right, so I'm going to click on Build Solution. And so what this does is it builds that, and it actually saves us a bit of time. We might not notice that time difference in a small program like this, but as you build bigger and better projects, you'll definitely notice that difference. And as we look at the output dialog, we can quickly see what's happened behind the scenes. So we've seen what's happened is it's created that DLL in this location here. We can also see that there's been no errors associated with this build. So everything looks good to go, and we can build this. I'll quickly just show you where that DLL is. So if we go to where we selected that default location, which was source and repos, this is the name of the project that we selected. I'm going to click on that again. I'm going to have a look at the bin, debug, the name of the framework. This is all standard, by the way. You can follow along and check yourself. And this is the all-important DLL that the CLR needs in order to send that machine readable language code to convert it to understandable instructions for the computer to actually run the program. So we verified that the location's there. I'm going to go back to the IDE. I'm now going to, now everything's all a go, click on this button, Hello World, and this will essentially run the solution. You can also do it here by clicking on debug and start debugging as well. I'm going to go ahead and click on the button now. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we have this console application here, and we have what is printed out called Hello World. So job done. If you've made it this far, congratulations, you've created your first Hello World C# application. So, you know, many well dones there for you. I'm going to now press on any key as this says to close the window. And yeah, that was it really, your first program. So hopefully that went smoothly for you, but let's talk about our next steps now. All right, so the challenge is called Challenge Reprint. So now you know how to do a print statement. What I'm asking you to do now is extend that to print out 10 different print statements. So if you programmed before, there's two ways of doing this. One, there's the easier way that everyone should know based on that first milestone, printing 10 different statements. I won't go into how, but you should obviously know that, hopefully. And then there's another way, a bonus point, if you will, if you know how to do it this way. If you programmed before, all you need to do really is a few lines of code. And we'll actually touch on the solution or the topic later on. So I won't give that away just yet. So I'll let you ponder on that. So challenge, reprint, print 10 different print statements. Let us know how you get on in the comment section. Peace. All right, so introducing the SkillStruct University sign-up console. So this is what we're going to code together. Let me zoom out a little bit more so you can see it a little bit better. So this is what we're going to code together, people. Don't worry if you see all these lines of codes and what's all of this, what's all of that. We're going to break it down. So don't worry about that. I've got you. We're going to do this together. I just wanted to show you this before we get started into all of this, what we're going to do at the end. So don't worry, like I said, I've got you. All right, so you've seen this. I want to, before we get stuck into this, discuss a little bit of theory first. Some of the concepts we're going to be talking about are variables, reference types, the history of C# a little bit, my own definitions of certain things as well. So let's do all of that. So as we do build on this application, things start to make sense. So let's do that. Let's talk about theory next. Okay, so I'm going to combine two key things here. I want to give you ultimately a brief history lesson and also talk about my understanding of programming. And so when, as a computer scientist, I think of programming, I really think about one core thing, logic. So logic really comes down to behaviors based on given scenarios. So if I am hungry, then I will go to the fridge. If I am thirsty, then I will go and get a drink. Similarly, that's how logic and programming works as well. If you are under 18, you cannot join the SkillStruct University network. And it's for us to program. And the theory based on that was from a person called George Boole, who created Boolean algebra in 1847. This person, who was a mathematician and, like I said, really helped with the theory of computer programming that we know today. We see some key things from some of his theories with ands and ors, things that we use in programming every day. And in fact, we are going to be using and quite a bit in our program. So you will see that anyway. But it's very important just to get a bit of history here. So that's the person that really helped kickstart what we know as computer programming today. And then a little while after that, the first computer was created, and then under 60 years from then, C# was born. So you can see how obviously this is a very, very high level point of view of how we came from just someone theorizing about logic, and the way we use things like ands and XORs really helped build the computer, and that in thus really helped build programs just like C#, which we're very accustomed to today. So that's a little bit of a history lesson there on C#. I'm now going to move on to another key topic, which is value types and reference types. All right, let's talk value types. Let's talk reference types. So I'm going to focus on value types on the left first. So examples of value types are integers, floats, dates, struts, doubles, etc., etc. That's an example of a value type. And you may have heard of words like variables. That's very much aligned with when we're talking about types. So a value type is, in C# world, something that doesn't hold a reference, but actually the value itself in its own memory allocation in the stack. So another key concept that we have in C# and programming in general is the garbage collector. So as you run these programs, there's a certain amount of memory that the computer needs to actually deal with the variables and things like that. That's managed with the stack and the heap. And the reference types normally are associated with the heap. And the difference there is rather than holding the actual value itself, it actually references something to the actual value which is on the stack. So reference types are strings, arrays, lists, and objects. And how I like to really, in terms of an analogy, like to describe this is, imagine you have a book on how to program. And the first thing, if you're looking for a particular thing, let's say C#, is you look at the index page. And so you say, where is how to program in C#? Page 6. That's the representation of a reference type. So that reference there, that index is going to point me to the right place, which is page 6. So rather than going to page 6 straight away, I have to look up at the reference type and then go to page 6. On the converse, we have value types, and value types is just directly going to page 6. So I don't need an index. I can go straight to the page 6 to actually find out how to program in C#. That's the best analogy I can think of off the top of my head to describe the main differences. You can tell it's a lot quicker accessing the value type than the reference type, because I have to look at index and then I have to go to the page. So I don't go straight away there using the reference type. So that's a concept, and it actually has some real purpose as to why there are value types and why there are reference types. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. I won't go into that in this particular video. It's quite out of scope, but just to let you know, there are value types and reference types, and it's very important to understand that in C#. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you is control flow. And control flow is really all about how you get a program to do what you want, essentially. And so these are some key concepts when it comes to control flow. So we have things like branching, and one good example of branching is the if statement. So with the if statement, you can branch off to do a series of things. So if this happens, then do that. If not, then do this. And that's basically the control flow of actually doing branching. So that's one way. We've got switching as well, where we have the switch statements. Case you do this, then do that. Or switch case, if you do that, then break and end the program. This will come all natural and make sense when we get onto the topic. We've got iterating, so looping essentially, so while loops, for loops, things like that. So when you're trying to repeat a process again and again. So for example, in our current application, there's a stage where if you get something wrong, then we actually go from the beginning and you have to write your username again, etc., etc. So that's when we're talking about iterating. So it's all about repeating. Jumping is going from one line of code and jump into another line of code rather than going sequential like the normal or the default way we program. And then handling is all about error handling. And we do a little bit of that when we use a function called try pass, and we'll come on to that again as we talk about our program. But yes, this is the entirety of the control flow equation.
Hey everyone, just a quick health check. How are you getting along with the video? Are you able to follow along? Are you able to reach the milestones? Let us know in the comment section. Either myself or someone in the team will love to help you and support you on your journey. So I definitely encourage you to use the comment section. People are really friendly here in our network. So if you are struggling or you're not able to follow along for whatever reason, do let us know. If you do have questions on the video, please do let us know. We're here to help. We're here to support. Please continue with the video. Peace.
All right, so we have a brand new project here, which is a console application called SkillStruct University. If you need a little reminder as to how to create a project, just go back to the clip where we create our first Hello World program. Okay, so now we have this blank slate here. We really want to populate this with some code. And what we normally tend to do is declare some variables as programmers. Okay, so the variables we're going to start off with are strings. Don't forget, variables are either value types or reference types, and string is a reference type. So that's what we're going to do here. And the convention of how to do that is first you type in the type, which is string, and then the name of the type that you want it to be called. So here I'm going to call this a username, and then to finalize that declaration, I'm going to add a semicolon. So that's how you declare a variable in C#. All right, so we're going to need some more strings. So I'm going to call this next one message. So the message as to why you want to join the SkillStruct University network. Don't forget, this is based on the SkillStruct University network sign-up form. Okay, so what else do we need? So we need a string for email. We need a string for college. We're also going to use string for age, actually. You might be thinking it might make sense to use a type like integer or number. You're right, technically, but the way that when code gets compiled, numbers sometimes can be a bit funny. And so the best way as programmers we handle that is by actually using strings and then using like functions like parsing to manipulate strings into numbers or integers when it suits us. So now we're going to call that string age, trust me on this one. And also we're going to use string for phone number. Okay, so I think these are all the main players, all the main fields that we need to populate in the console application. Hence why we haven't actually explicitly said or initialized these yet. We want to do that all in the console application. But these are all the values that we are going to declare. And now I'm actually going to do something that is quite familiar to you lot, hopefully by now, which is the console.writeLine. So that initial print statement we're going to do, which welcomes the user to the SkillStruct University sign-up console. So to do that, rather than actually just writing out console.writeLine, I'm actually just going to cheat a little bit and just use the snippet. And so that snippet is CW, and then I'm going to tab twice. So tab, and now that's created that console.writeLine. And then I need some quotes here, double quotes, and then within those double quotes, I'm going to write the message, welcome to the SkillStruct University sign up console. There we go. Great. And if you've done that from scratch, well done. Don't forget the semicolon. All right. So now that's done. Now we're going to create our while loop. All right. So let's create that while loop. And in order to do that, I'm going to type in while. You can notice IntelliSense has said, hey, we've just noticed you're creating a while. Do you want us to create a while loop for you? Just tab twice if you want us to. I'm actually not going to this time. I'm actually just going to do it the long way. So in order to create a while loop, I'm going to open bracket, and then it's already created a close bracket for us. And within this bracket, that's where we have to write the condition to satisfy this while loop. And the condition we want is if the user attempts more than 3 times or has made a successful attempt, then end this whole loop and thus end the program. And we're going to do that shortly. By default, what this does is it does a while true. So while true, and then don't forget these important curly brackets. Normally I like to click on enter and have it in this format. I just like this style. It's a style that we're used to as C# developers. So what this loop is doing is while true, keep looping. And what this effectively means is because true is always true, this effectively is something that we call a forever loop. And this might make sense and might be worth doing in certain scenarios, but not in this scenario. So what we're going to need is 2 more variables, one to satisfy that successful Boolean and another one to satisfy the number of attempts. So we're going to need here a int, and that int is going to be called number of attempts. And the convention when writing variables is if you have more than a few words as variables, you'll notice we capitalize the next word. So you've got number here, that's first of all in small capital letters, and then we begin with a capital O of, and then again attempts, capital A, etc., etc. This is what we call Pascal casing. That's just a normal convention. For functions like main, you can see here, that's where we use camel casing. So we always tend to capitalize the first letter. But anyway, so we're actually going to, rather than just declare it like this, we're going to initialize this variable. And so I'm going to do equals 0. So initializing normally is when you equate the variable to either a string or a number or in whatever. So when you do equals, that's when you're basically initializing a variable. Okay, so we also need a Boolean, but the convention here is bool for Boolean, and then we're gonna just call this success. And I'm going to initialize that to false. And then semicolon. All right, so now instead of this true, we're gonna change this a little bit and say while number of attempts is less than 3, and so that logic that we were talking about with the logic gates, this is where we use and the way we declare and in C# is to ampersand, so 1, 2, and success is not true. So how we do that is with not, so the way we do not in C#, so NOT is with an exclamation. And so next to the not or right after, we're going to write success. So this is the condition. So this basically means while the number of attempts is not greater than 3 and success is not true, then just keep on looping. And so that's the condition that satisfies this program and this while loop. That's what we want here. That's the behavior we expect. All right, so let's start to populate this now. So the mindset a programmer needs to have is one that is very process orientated. So for example, an analogy I like to use is if someone from Mars asks you how to get down the road, you basically have to be very specific. You're going to have to mention you may have to cross a road, you may have to mention you might have to lean a little bit left and right, etc., etc., etc. Similarly with code, it's very process orientated. You really have to have a good level of detail. You've got to imagine we're building something from scratch, literally. So what we have to do is make sure step by step, process by process, sequential order by sequential order, we're able to write out exactly what we want the program to do. We've got the infrastructure here. We just need to explain what exactly we need to do. So first of all, we want the user to populate a username. That's what we want to do next. So here we've already got the print statement, welcome to the University sign-up console. So the user knows they're at the right place. We now need to tell the user to write their username. So once again, we're going to use a print statement. I'm going to write, please enter your username. Perfect. And now we need something that will help the user or allow the user to write their username, and we need to store that into this username variable. So how we do that is we do username. So this is the name of the variable, equals, and we're going to use something called console.readline. So this functionality gives us the ability to take in a user's prompt or whatever the user enters in their input. So now basically what's happened now is we've asked the user to enter the username. We're now waiting for the user to enter something, which is their username, and we're going to use that value here. So that is now effectively initialized here. All right, so we're going to need to do this for the message, the email, college, number, etc., etc. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here and do the old copy and paste. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy and paste this a couple times, or a few times, 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel free to write this out yourselves from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and be a bit cheeky here. So I'm now going to change this to, I'm going to make this in order, to be fair, or in a particular order. All right, so email, I'll use the email first here, and then email here. Just make sure, obviously, you don't want to catch yourself out with the copy and paste. What else? I'm going to write college here, and then I'm going to change that to college 2. What else do I need? I'm going to change this to message, and then I'm going to change this to message as well. And then I'm going to change this to age. Change that to age as well. And the reason why this works is because this read line returns a string. And so if this was an integer or anything else, then this wouldn't work, or this will break. So, okay, what else do we need? I think we're missing something. Username, email, college, message, age. What are we missing? Phone number. Thanks to that green line, I know what I'm missing. Perfect. So I need one more of these. And I'm going to call this phone number. Phone number. Again, you want to just double check you don't catch yourself out. The safer way is to just do this explicitly, but that takes a little bit longer. And most developers honestly end up doing this throughout their lifetime. It's just through experience. All right, so that looks good to me. Great. So now, actually, and I'll show you what this does so far without any, actually, no, I can't really do that. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'll hold off for that. I know I'm just really eager to show you this program. I now need to create something of another loop, which is an if statement. All right, so we're going to need to do a bit of branching here with the if statement. And what we want to do with the if statement is verify each of these strings are populated. So as the users input information, we want to make sure they're not doing empty strings or just doing essentially blanks. And so what we're going to use is a very special method called isNo_Empty. But in order to do that, we're going to create the if statement. So how we do that is we type in if, and then if you tab twice, Visual Studio will do the rest for you. Really not much to it, and you should also be used to it with the while loop. Same structure. You've got the parentheses here where you write the condition, and then you've got these curly brackets where we implement the logic. So I'm going to get rid of that true default that's in there, and I'm going to basically use something called isNo_Empty. In order to access that method, we're going to need to type in string, which is a reference type, which is a class, as you can see there. And as I click on the period or the full stop, you can see that it has various methods here. So these purple boxes are all methods that you can see, and the blue ones are fields. But we're going to focus on isNo_Empty here. Feel free in your own time to play around with the other methods and fields if you want. So how this works, let me take a step back and explain isNo_Empty. So what it essentially does is it returns a Boolean and it takes in a string. So we're going to have to repeat this process about 6 times for each of the fields that we do have. And so what we're going to do is pass in username here, like so. And then you've already experienced using ands in the logic gates. We're going to now experience using ors. And in order to do ors, it's these double horizontal bars like so. So what this means is if this string is no empty, or and we're going to do the next string is no empty. So just repeat the process, like I said, 6 times, but now we're going to do it 5 more times. Is no empty, open, and then we're going to use email. No particular order here really is essential. Just make sure that all of these are being verified here. So I'm going to now continue with the rest of them. So string.isNo_Empty. What's next? College. And then or string dot is no empty with message. And don't be too alarmed when you see errors in the error list until you finished your function or your if statement or whatever you're working on. Then look at it, because honestly sometimes you might get multiple errors, but that's because it's giving you the errors in real time. So string dot is no empty with age, and then or string dot is no empty phone number. Okay, and don't forget the closing bracket. All right, so that is great. We've populated all of that now, and we're verifying each of those variables. Now we next need to let the user know as a result of this. So if this is no empty, if any of them are, then that's not what we want, and we're ultimately going to reject the user's application and tell them that there is a problem here. And so what I'm going to do now is with CW tab, this will open out the structure that we need for the print statement. I'm going to type in the following message: there is an issue with your application. Please ensure all fields are filled out correctly. ... Cool. And we also need to increase the counter. So remember where we had this number of attempts, we need to let the loop know that we've already done another attempt, or we've just done an attempt. So in order to do that, you can do number of attempts is equal to number of attempts plus 1. And so what this effectively does is you can see that we initialized it with the number 0. It's just going to do 0 plus 1, loop again if it fails, and then just does 1 plus 1, etc., until the condition is met, and it's done it 3 times. But there's a cooler way of actually doing this. We can just use the counter notation, which is just plus plus, and then we add that semicolon. So that effectively does the same thing. And so we've got that now. Now we need something called an else block, which only works with the if statement. So I'm just going to tab twice so it does the structure for me. And now basically else, we're going to say, All right, everything's filled out correctly. Well done. And we're going to do that message just to essentially say, congratulations, you're part of the network. So I'm just going to tap twice. And now I'm going to write the following message. So congrats. You are now a member of the SkillStruct University network. Your application will now be processed. There we go. And also we need to let the condition know that success is now true. Now it's set to false by default. We need to tell it it's actually true now, so it doesn't have to loop again. So I'm just going to do success is equal to true. All right, okay, so we've just created our if statement now, which is great. And I've just noticed, please make sure you have the equal sign here, so it does actually loop 3 times. So what will happen now effectively is if that loops 1, 2, 3, and there's a wrong entry or a lack of entry here, it's just going to close. Or if there is a success, then it's going to close as well. So we want to make sure that equal sign makes a difference there. We want to make sure it does it 3 times and not 2. But okay, I feel like we've got the if statement here, and let's see what we're going to do next. All right, as I reflect on what we're going to do next, I also wanted to do a quick health check just to make sure everyone's able to follow along. If you're not able to follow along, you do have some errors, etc., feel free to use the comment section. I'm sure myself or the team or people also follow along will be happy to help and support you. But just to recap what we've done so far, so inside this static void main method, we have a series of variables here that we'll use in our while loop. We have this print statement that welcomes the user to our SkillStruct University sign-up console. Again, this is based on the SkillStruct University page where users tend to sign up. So we have these variables here. We have one variable, number of attempts, and we have success. So number of attempts looks for the amount of times that this user has attempted to make sure that they're filling out their username, email, etc., correctly. And if they do, we have this flag here just to monitor that, and we monitor that here with that success variable. And in order to make sure that the user is actually filling out their their information correctly, we have this if statement here. And so what this does here with this string .isNo_empty is it takes in a string here. So it takes in what we put here in this console.readline and just make sure that the user isn't inputting anything blank or empty or nulls, for example. And then if they are doing that, then we make sure that we let the user know that we need to make sure that you fill out all the options here correctly, and we increase that number of attempts by 1. Else, i.e. if all this information is filled out correctly, then we give them a message saying, congratulations, you're a member of the SkillStruct University network, your application will be processed, and we change that Boolean flag from false to true. That's what we've got so far. The next thing we're going to do is resolve this issue where we need to actually verify the user is 18 and over. Let's look at that next. So let's look at resolving age and making sure that the user is at least 18 years old. In order to do that, we're basically going to create our own method. All right, so a method is a function which defines actions, and a method is classed as a verb. So taking our example from the SkillStruct University console, that is age valid method is a method because it's doing an action, which is validation. So that's a great example of using a method. So the convention is, as long as you're creating a method that does an operation or an action, that is a fully qualified method. What you don't want to do is mix up nouns and verbs. So take the noun program or person. You don't want a method called person because that's what we would call a noun, which belongs to classes. We're not going to get into classes just yet, but we will do soon. But for now, focus on a method, and a method is a function that defines actions. Hopefully that made sense. Let's get back to our program. And we're going to add that to this if statement. So at the end of it, it's going to look something like this. So we're going to have or is age valid. And of course, we need to pass in the age for the function or the method to validate it. It will be something like this, where we'll pass in age, like so. And so at the moment, we can see this doesn't exist. We're going to make it exist in a second, and there's a quick way to do it, but for this instance, we're going to do it the slightly longer way, just so you get that sense of doing things from scratch. All right, so let's do that now. We're going to create a method, and we want to make sure that that method is outside of this main. And so I'm just going to click on this curly bracket here, and this is going to indicate where it begins and ends. So it ends here. I'm going to click on enter a couple times, and now I can create our method. And so to create our own method here is age valid. We need to do a couple things here. So the first thing we need to do is type in the word static. And the reason why we write static here is because we need to use it in our main method, and we can't use it in our main method if we don't have the word static here. All right, static, and then we need the return type, which is Boolean, or bool in this case. And then I'm going to call it is age valid. So this is the name of our function. And then it's going to need a string, and that string, we're going to call it age. And now it's just asking for a couple things here. So first of all, we need the curly brackets, and now it's complaining that we don't have a return statement. So what it's expecting something is return a Boolean. So let's say we return true. For now, no complaints. However, obviously we want to add a bit more logic here, so we don't need that actually. We're going to do a couple things now. And in order to complete this method, we're basically going to need some variables. So we're just going to declare a couple. So we need one for once we convert that string into an integer. So I'm going to call that age passed, or we can call it age converted, same thing. Then I'm going to do the semicolon, and then we need a Boolean, and I'm going to call that result. And in order to convert this string into an integer, we're going to use something called try parse. And in order to initiate that, we're going to essentially do something like this. So int dot try parse, and just like string, by the way, int itself has its own functions as well, but we're going to focus on try parse. So try parse, open bracket, it takes in a string, and we're going to use age here. And then it needs an output of an integer. So I'm just going to type in the keyword out, and then the result, which is age parsed. So basically what will happen is it will, let me make sure it does say age parsed. Let me fix that up. Okay, so it will take in age parsed, semicolon, and now I want this to be in this result. So I'm basically going to add result here. Spelling is not A1 at the moment. Okay, here we go. So result is equal to int.tryParse. So tryParse returns a Boolean, takes in that string of age, and then the output would be the result. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we need to use an if statement. So we're going to create one now. And now in that if statement, we're basically going to check the result. So if the result is true, and, so remember and, couple ampersands, age passed, so that integer is greater or equal to 18, then return true. Not all cold pass return a value, because we need an else here. So we also need an else, just to basically explain else return false. All right, so just to recap on this, we have a method called isAgeValid. We have a couple variables here. One's an integer, one's a Boolean. And then we use that Boolean here for this tryParse method. And then whatever that result is and whatever the age parsed is, we want to make sure that that person's entered an age that is 18 and over. If that's the case, then thumbs up, return true. If not, then we return false. All right, so now let's put this isAgeValid method into our if statement. And in order to do that, we are going to add here, or is age valid? And we're going to pass in that age variable. Okay, and now I'm basically going to add equals to false here. So if it equates to false, then it will go into this. There's a problem with your application, blah, blah, blah. All right, that's sorted now. I think we've got everything we need for this demonstration. So let's do a bit of a demo next with our new SkillStruct University console application. All right, congratulations all, we've made it this far. So give yourselves a pat on the back. We're able to create this from scratch. I told you I got you, and look at where we are. All right, so we've got a lot going on here. We've got while loops, we've got if statements, we've got our own function here. If we scroll a little bit down, so we've got it all going on here in this. We've got some strings, we're converting strings to ints, we've got booleans. So we've got quite a lot going on here. So it's really great that you're able to follow along. If you weren't able to follow along with us, you've got some errors, for example, do write in the comment section, let us know so we can try our very best to support you, or reach out at SkillStruct as well. All right, so let's see if this program does what we want. So we're going to do a demo now. So I'm going to click on this button so we can debug, or you can click on F5. Now we can see the welcome to the SkillStruct University sign-up console, enter your username. So I'm going to enter a username. I'm going to call it John Doe as my username. Email is jd at Outlook. Let's use Outlook.com. If I can spell that properly. There we go. Enter the college. I'm just going to make up a college, Smith College. All right, and enter the message. So I want to join the network to improve my knowledge on technology. Good a reason as any. Okay, enter the age. So we're not going to write an age 18 and over. We just want to test out that is age valid functionality. So we're going to put 17 here. And then the number, I'm going to just put a random number. Okay, so let's see what happens. Hopefully, all going well. It tells us there is an issue and we need to do this again. And then it starts off with the please enter your username. Let's see what happens. So click on enter. Hey presto, just what we wanted. It's telling us there's an issue with the application and ensure that all the fields are filled out correctly. I can see they're all filled out, but yes, this is 17. It should be 18 and over. So let's do that now. So I'm now going to, once again, just call it John Doe and then use the similar email. So jd at outlook.com. And then I'm going to enter the college, Smith College. And then the message, I want to join the network to be a part of the mentoring program. Good a reason as any. Click on the age of 18 this time, and then the number, and all going well this time. The application will end, so all of this will cease. So you can see this orange ready here will end, and the program will end gracefully, letting us know that we've been successful. So click on enter. We can see that the program has ended, and we get that message, congratulations, you're a member of the SkillStruct University Network, your application will be processed. There we go. So that's the demo. We can also test out other things too, but I'll let you do that in your own free time. But here we go. Congratulations on doing your second program. Let's actually do things with classes, objects. Next, quite fundamental to C#. I feel like that will really benefit your learning of C#. So let's do that next.
All right, me again, here to introduce the second challenge, time to switch it up. No pun intended. Well, I guess a little bit pun intended. So basically, this one really encourages independent learning because in this particular chapter, we don't directly talk about the switch statement or implement it in any way. However, hopefully you're feeling comfortable with the IDE, and you should be able to, maybe do a little bit of searching in terms of how to do this particular one. But basically what we'd like you to do is use the switch statement to print out the given values you see on the screen. So for example, you create a switch case for, the given months in the year. If the user types in 1 in the console application, it should print out the first, month of the year, which is of course January, 2nd February, etc., etc. And so, let us know if you're able to figure it out. Obviously, doing the old searching online, you should be able to relatively find this. But what I want to get you to do is feel comfortable using the IDE and programming in C#, understanding what you're doing. There's a secret out there, most programmers, no matter how senior, still search for things, the simplest of things. So you're no different here. So part of this playbook, again, practical experience. We don't want you to necessarily copy and paste. We want you to understand what you're doing, and that's part of independent learning as well. So as you get comfortable with the IDE, you should be able to feel comfortable playing around and experimenting for yourself, playing around, hence the playbook, with, the corresponding programming language. Anyway, let us know how you get on in the comment section. That's it for me now. On to the next one.
All right, so what is a class and what is an object? So in C#, a class is a blueprint that combines fields and methods. This should be familiar to you because you already came across a class with our program class in program 2 and even program 1. You even came across fields and methods in our second program. So we used fields, variables to create those strings before, and we had that isAgeValid method. So that should actually become more familiar with you. What I should want to highlight is a class is classed as a noun. And so when we break down this definition of a class is a blueprint. A blueprint is a design of something. A thing is a noun. So quite often you'll hear a program class, a person class, a database class. These are all nouns, and that's why you have that naming convention. For example, you wouldn't have a program name isAgeValid as a class, for example. Doesn't make any sense. You'd have that as a method because methods are associated with doing, action, verbs. And so that's why we called it isAgeValid, because we know what that's doing by the name of that method. So a class is a blueprint that combines fields and methods. So within that method, you'll have, actions, and within, a class, you'll have many fields, many methods, or you can use variables if you want for fields. I don't want to over confuse you, but just understand in simple terms that a class, blueprint that combines fields and methods, which is a noun. On the other hand, you have an object. An object you haven't really come across, but you will do in this third program. That is a copy of a class. And so imagine that person class has been created. You need to utilize that in your program. And the mechanism to utilize that is through objects. You can't use classes because it's quite theoretical. In C# terms, you need an object to bring that out to life. And that's what we use pretty much in C# to program a lot of the time. We don't often just focus on the main class program to just program because obviously you want to create more larger and greater things. And that's where the use of objects come into effect. So we're going to show you what that exactly means in our third program next. So if that didn't make sense right now, it definitely will make sense after we create our third program. So let's do that next. All right, so welcome to the SkillStruct University portal. Okay, not a lot going on right now, but that's what we're here to do, build this from scratch. We're going to do a few things. So just to explain what the SkillStruct University portal is, it ultimately comes down to being a database with our SkillStruct University members. We're then going to add some logic to it so we can filter our members by selecting certain age groups and things like that. We're going to do all of that, and it all comes to life here in this main. So what do we need? We need 2 classes. We need a SkillStruct University member class, and we're going to need a SkillStruct University database class. So we're going to create the first class, which is the SkillStruct University member class now. I'm not going to go into how to create a new project. You should know that by now. But if you don't know, just rewind to our first project. Okay, so in order to create a new class, I'm going to go here to our solution. I'm going to right click, go on to add, and then I'm going to click on class. Okay, so now it's come up with this add new item dialog box. It's now by default selected class because that's what we selected in the first place. And now it's asking us for a name. So I'm going to call this SkillStruct University member. University member. Perfect. And hey presto, it's create our brand new class. And this should be familiar with our program class here. The only thing that is obviously a bit distinctive is this main method. So each, framework will have somewhere where everything will happen in main. So it doesn't matter what you're using, if it's C++, if it's Python, whatever you use, there's going to be somewhere where the main bit of the program happens. For C#, this is where the main happens here. When you build console applications, it might be slightly different on other applications. Even with web projects, it might be slightly different too, but everywhere has a main point, and that will be here for a main starting point. That doesn't change. What does change is the additional objects that we'll create for that main. And in order to do that, the convention we normally do is create classes. And so this is our SkillStruct University member class, and now we need to populate with information. I wonder what information we're going to use. So if you said, why don't we use those variables that we had in console application 2? You are correct in that. So essentially the design or this template is going to be based off the inputs that we had with those string variables in our second application. So username, phone number, message, etc., etc. We're going to build a class based on all of those variables. The only difference is we're going to use properties instead of variables. And what a property is, all right, so to explain what a property is in C#, I have to explain what a field is. A field in C# is a private variable. Variables that are private by default. And so what that means is it's not easily accessible to other classes. This is all to do with data integrity and making sure that the consistency of data security is prevalent. And as we use different classes and objects, it's very important to create a mechanism of security in C#. Using fields and leveraging that in classes is one way to do that. And properties are the gateway to those fields. So properties have these getter and setter functions that give us what we need when it comes to the fields that we want to access. So whether we want to set those fields or we want to get the value from those fields, that's where properties come in. So that's the makeup of what a property is. Very integral in the way that we use classes and create objects in C#, all to do with, like I said, data integrity and just creating ways to be as secure as possible when it comes to dealing with these different classes and objects in C#. Hopefully that made sense. We're going to see an example of what a full property is, so you can see what a field is or what it looks like. And you'll also see many times how we use properties and how this all fits together. So that's that for property. Let's get back to the code. Okay, so now you've got an understanding of what a property is. Let's create one. So in order to create one, I'm going to use the cheat code, or the shortcut is PROP or prop, and I'm going to tap twice, and it's created our property for us. Okay, so because we explained property and we referenced fields, I want to show you what the full version of this is. So technically, this is the shortcut of the property. So if you want to see the full version, you go to prop full, and we rarely use this, or I certainly rarely use this one. And this is what that looks like. So, okay, it's complaining that we've got the same name twice. So I'm just going to call this my property full, just to get that context. Okay, so you've got this full version, which has that getter and setter. So we can get the value, that field, from here. And we can also set the value as well for this property. But to explain what we have here, we have that backend field, which essentially is a variable that hasn't been, initiated, so a declared variable here, and it's private. So that's what is explicitly stated here because it's only really for this property. Okay, so that is the full version of the property. I don't want to go too much into the nitty-gritty of it. I just wanted to show you, because we explained that definition, what actually is a full version of that property. Like I said, I rarely use it, so I'm just going to remove that and focus on the normal one. And now I'm going to actually populate what I want. So I'm going to change this into a string type here, and I'm going to call this username. So username, and then I'm going to populate the other 5 variables, or the properties in this case. I'm just going to copy and paste this and just rename. Feel free to do the same, or use that prop, P-O-R-P tab if you want to. All right, so we've got a phone number, and we have college, no particular order. Just like to make sure these are fairly neat as I go along. All right, so we've got college, we have message as well. Oh. And then we have, what else do we have? We have email. Okay. And then we have age. So one thing we're going to do slightly different. So we are actually going to make this an integer. And as you become a better programmer, you're going to understand context more, because I know what I want to do with this portal application. I know I don't need to call this a string, and I don't need to do any conversions. I just need to declare this as a integer or an int, and just set that as age. All right, so I feel like we've got everything that we need when it comes to this SkillStruct University member class. We have all the properties, and all of these are based off the second application that we did, so nothing too scary there. The only thing that might be a bit, disfamiliar is the fact that we've actually capitalized all of these, whereas in the previous application, we had everything all uncapitalized. So the reason why we have things capitalized here is because the convention for a property is that we have it capitalized. That's because these getter and setter are actually functions. Remember, I showed you the full version of the property, and you can clearly see that getter and setter are actually functions. So that's why we have these capitalized. But yes, now that we have everything that we need for this class, let's now create the SkillStruct University database. So now we've got our SkillStruct University database class. Just to explain briefly what a database is ultimately comes down to a place where you store information. And what we normally do with that information is query that information. So you've probably come across the term CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete. So pretty self-explanatory. Those are the kind of things we do with a database. So we're either creating information, which we're going to do in this tutorial. We either reading information, so selecting certain bits of information, which we're going to do. We either update, we're not going to update, or delete. We're not going to delete in this one. So we're going to focus pretty much on creating information and reading that information. So in order to create that information, we're going to use this class to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create objects. So SkillStruct University member objects. So essentially the database is going to be made up of information which details or encapsulates members from the SkillStruct University network. So let's do that now. All right, so let's create our new object. And the structure of creating a new object is actually very similar to initializing a string or initializing an int, etc., which you've come across before in the past. So that shouldn't be too unfamiliar to you. So in order to create an object, we are first going to need a type. And so our type is going to be SkillStruct University member. And then we're going to call it SkillStruct University member 1, just for a unique reference point. So SkillStruct University member 1, and then equals new, and then SkillStruct University member, open, close bracket. So that is your first object. And so to create another object, I'm just going to copy and paste it because it's going to be the same type, which is SkillStruct University member. The only difference is instead of it being called SkillStruct University member 1, we are going to call it SkillStruct University member 2. Okay, so just taking a quick step back, we've just created our first object. We've initialized it with this new keyword with the name of the type, which is SkillStruct University member. Let's add some information to the object next. All right, so in order to initialize objects, there are many ways to do it. The way I'm going to do it is leveraging collection initializers. And what that is after you create your new object, you add after the closing parentheses, you add 2 curly brackets here. And this will expose the properties that we created earlier. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to create this on a new line, these curly brackets, just so you see exactly what's going on. And so now if I go between those curly brackets and I type in username, or IntelliSense has already given us the heads up, if I just tab that, and then username is equal to, I can name this John Doe. And remember when I was talking about the properties with getters and setters, this is where we are setting those values for the property here. So this exposes the property, and this is why we often use properties instead of fields and variables. This is just a really cool way, and this is the real purpose really of having properties within C#. So similarly with the other properties, we are going to first of all call age here. I'm just going to make this 20. I'm going to notice there's no quotes because it's a number now, or int. College, we're going to call it the Smith College. And then what else do we have? We've got the message. I want to be a, I'm just going to call it SU for short, SkillStruct University member, to ensure I have the best chance of success. Perfect. And then comma, and I'm just going to do this on a new line. And then what else is next? I think is, okay, email. And then email I'm going to put as, I'm going to call it jd@outlook.com. Then what else do we have? Phone number is just some random number, to be honest. Cool. All right, and I think we've got all 6 properties there. Just a quick count. Perfect. And now we need to replicate this for our second user. And so what I'm going to do is initialize this object by having those curly brackets. So open, close, curly bracket, put enter in between a couple spaces, so a couple enters, just so you can see what's going on. And then we begin again. So you got username. I'm going to call it something different. Let's Jane Doe. Oh, and then comma. And then I'm going to say the age is 30. No particular order on this. And then college, I'm just going to call it Forest Gate College. And then I am going to the email, which I will call Jane D@outlook.com. What else do we need? We need a message equals I want to join the SU network to get an opportunity to be mentored by the best in industry. It's a good reason as any. All right, I'm just going to put a comma there. All right, and then just enter for a new line. And then what's missing? Phone number is some random number. Okay. Do I have anything else? Let me just do a quick count. So we've got, I think that's all that we need. All right, perfect. Let me now just zoom out a little bit, see what's going on here, just make some space. I'm just going to reduce the size of this Solution Explorer. Okay, so we've got our objects initialized. Let's leverage them. And in order to leverage them, we are going to need a function that reads this all. So let's create that next. So now that we have our newly created objects, we now need a method that essentially reads all the members from the SkillStruct University database. And the convention for method you should know from the second program. One slight difference is we are going to start off with the access modifier public. And the reason why we do that is, one, this is not a static class, and two, we need to leverage this method in our program class. So whenever those things happen, where it's not a static class and we need to leverage a method in a different class, the convention is to use public. And I don't have time to, in this series, to talk about the different access modifier types and their uses or not. Perhaps in a future series we can tackle that. But for now, whenever this scenario happens, first thing you need to write is public, then everything else should be fairly familiar. So the next thing we need is the return type, and the return type is going to be list of SkillStruct University member. So in order to do that, we are going to write list, which takes in a list of T type, and that type is SkillStruct University member. And T can be anything, so any type, so string, int, etc., but we need a list of SkillStruct University members. And then the name of this will be get SkillStruct University members, which is a great suggested name. And then I'm going to do the usual open close bracket and then the curly brackets with an enter so we can write the logic that we need. So it's complaining obviously that not all code paths return a value. For now, just to please the error list, I'm going to just write new list of SkillStruct University member and then open close bracket and then semicolon. All right, so now we have our method. Let's start to import the logic for this. All right, so what we're going to do now is create a new list of SkillStruct University members. And in order to do that is the standard convention of the type, which is a list of SkillStruct University member. And then the name, which we will call SkillStruct University members. And then we're going to equate that to new list of SkillStruct University member. Don't forget the open and close bracket and the semicolon. And so now that's created, we need to populate it with information. Fortunately for us, we've already got that up here, SkillStruct University member 1 and 2. We need to add that there. Fortunately for us, if we use that method, SkillStruct University members, and click on dot, we already get access to a key method here, which is add, which takes in a SkillStruct University member. And so what we're going to do now is add, and then of course, we are going to add SkillStruct University member 1 and 2. So that's the first one, SkillStruct University member 1. And now I'm going to just do a cheeky copy and paste and just make sure I change the last number to 2. Okay, so that's that done. And then finally, I'm going to get rid of this return here and just return SkillStruct University members. University members here at the semicolon. I feel like we have everything needed here. Now we need to leverage this method and this object in the class program. So let's do that next. Okay, so I feel like we have everything that we need here in this class, the SkillStruct University database class and the SkillStruct member class. We're now going to see how everything comes together here in this main program class and specifically in this main function. So if anything hasn't made sense yet, it certainly will do by the time that we finish writing everything we need in this main function. But before we get into that, let's do a health check next. All right, how is everyone? Hopefully everyone's well and has been able to follow along. If not, please do reach out at SkillStruct or use the comment section. If you are following along and you see some unresolved comments, feel free to take the initiative and help out as well. We want to create that sort of platform. But just to explain what we've done so far, we started off with this new program called SkillStruct University Portal, but we needed to set the foundations. And so what that meant was creating a couple new classes. So the first thing we did is create this SkillStruct University member class, which is populated with a series of properties based on our second program that we did together before with the SkillStruct University sign-up console. We then wanted to leverage this in a database, so we decided to create a database class where we actually created our first objects called SkillStruct University member 1 and 2. Then we needed a function or a method to leverage that and get a function to basically just get all of that information and return it. And so that's what we've done here in this get SkillStruct University members method. And now that's where we are so far. We are at the stage where we can leverage it here in our main class program and in this main function. So that's where we are so far. Hopefully that made sense. So let's get started with our main and let's put all of these pieces together. All right, so the first thing I want to do in this function is add a try catch block. This is one of the control flow mechanisms. So this is the handling part. This is a very common thing to do as developers, to add error handling, fairly standard. So in order to do that, I am going to type in try, tab twice, and then it will create the try catch block. So just to explain it, so what it's going to do is try to execute all the code and logic here that we need. And then if there's any errors, it catches it here in this exception type, and then it will throw a exception. I'm going to tweak this a little bit. I'm going to capture that exception in a variable called EX. And then what I'm going to do, instead of having this throw, which essentially just throws an error and just breaks the program, what we're going to do is write a print statement. And then I am going to write a sentence. There has been this error, and then I'm going to pass in that error by adding a plus and then concatenating it with ex dot message. And so what that does is it will just print out whatever the error message is. Fairly standard, like I said. This is the way we handle errors normally in C#, but in general. So it doesn't matter if you're using Python or Java, this try catch mechanism is fairly standard. So we're going to implement all the logic we need in this try block. And the first thing we're going to need is that access to this get SkillStruct University members, which reads all the objects that we created previously. And in order to do that, we are going to create an object of SkillStruct University database. So we know how to do that by now. So SkillStruct University database, SkillStruct University database, that's the name, is equal to new SkillStruct University database with the parentheses and semicolon. And now if I do SkillStruct University database dot, it gives us access to that method we created earlier. And so in order to get access to what we've created here, we need a backend variable, which is a list of SkillStruct University member. So we also need to create that object as well in our program. So let's do that now. So we need a list of SkillStruct University member, and we are going to just call that SkillStruct University members is equal to new list of SkillStruct University member. Okay, what's it complaining about? Okay, so we don't have the reference to system.collection. Do we have it here? Yes, we do. Do we have it in the database one? We actually do. So maybe when we create new classes, it does it there by default. So just be careful of that. So basically, I'm just going to be cheeky. This is basically what it's complaining about. So if I go back to my program and paste it, that should resolve that error. There we go. Or we can let IntelliSense probably help us out as well. So if I click on that and do control period, it also tells us we need to add that using. So this references a library full of operations and classes and types, and one of those collections is a list, and a list is a collection, so that makes sense. So okay, now we've resolved that. We now need to equate this into this. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, just reorder this a little bit. So I'm just going to cut that and paste this here. Hold on, give me a second. Let me do that properly. Cut and paste it here, and then make sure I equate it. So I just like to tidy things up as I go along. All right, so SkillStruct University members is equal to SkillStruct University database.get SkillStruct University members. So we're doing a couple things here that create and read, and we got the result here in the SkillStruct University members. So next what we want to do is filter on that. And in order to filter, we're going to need another reference here, and that's going to be LINQ. So let's talk about LINQ for a little bit. All right, so what is LINQ in C#? LINQ, which stands for Language Integrated Query, is a Microsoft .NET Framework component that adds native data querying capabilities to .NET languages. So what that means is if you have a collection in C#, such as a list or an array where it contains a data set or some information, so it could be a list of strings or a list of ints, and you want to query it, and you want to, when I say query, you just want to find out information from that data set or that collection or that list. LINQ is the way that you do that in C#. So it's going to be a very useful commodity for us as we've created that data set or those SkillStruct members, and we want to query it to get certain information and filter on that information. So that's an explanation of what LINQ is. Let's actually implement or use that in our code now. So now we understand what LINQ is, and we've already created our collection of SkillStruct University members. Let's put the two together. And so what we need to now do is access that LINQ library. And the way we access libraries in C# is just above the namespace with the following convention, using, and then where that library is located. So for us, it's located in system.linq. And so what this will do now is give us a access point to many methods. And one of those methods that we need in particular to filter on, which is what we're focusing on in this program, is where. And so just to show you that, if I now access that collection and then write period to access all the methods, if I type in where, it gives us access to that where method. You see how it just lit up there before, if you didn't just rewind it again, or let me remove it and show you what it's like if I don't have this reference here at all, just so you see that actually without that reference there, we have no access point to where. So if I type in where now, no access. There you go. So now what I'm going to do is put that back. So using system.linq, and then I am going to access where again. All right, so where, here we go. And so what this does now is it's basically going to filter on a series of properties. So the properties are from the SkillStruct University members. You can see here all the different types of properties that we have, and that's what we're going to filter on here in this where method. And what this does, this is a bit out of scope for this particular series, but it passes in a lambda function and then it exposes all the properties for a given object. So for this instance, is SkillStruct University member. And so the way we access that is we need to call it a name. So what we're going to name our object, I'm just going to call it SU for SkillStruct University. And then the convention then is equal arrowhead. And then once it does that, and so what this means, it goes into an object. And now if I type in SU dot, it gives us access to all those properties that we had in SkillStruct University member. The one we're going to focus on is age, and what we want to filter on is age less than 30. And so in theory, this will return one result because in our database, we only have one user that is under the age of 30. Note, it's not equal to 30, it is less than 30. If it's less than or equal to 30, then it'll return both members. All right, so going back to program, here we have this new set of results. Now we need to add this to a, actually not a list, but an IEnumerable of SkillStruct University member. Just to quickly explain, IEnumerable is the highest in the hierarchy of collections. So each list is a collection, and within each collection is IEnumerable. IEnumerable basically means it can be iterated over. And so that's what we need to create now, an IEnumerable of SkillStruct University members. And in order to do that, the convention is type. So you know this by now, IEnumerable, and then the type, which is SkillStruct University members, or member, is equal to SkillStruct University. I'm going to call it members filtered, or be specific, age filtered. is equal to, and we don't assign it to IEnumerable, we assign it to a collection other than IEnumerable. For us, we're going to just stick to is equal to new list of SkillStruct University member. So like I said, all lists and collections are all IEnumerable. IEnumerable basically means it can be iterated over, which all collections can be, and a list is a collection. So that's why there's no problem here. Hopefully that made sense. Feel free in the comment section to ask any questions about anything I'm talking about. All right, so now we have our variable for age filtered. We're now going to include that with a for each next, so we can actually print the results now. And now that we've created this SkillStruct University members age filtered variable, let's assign it to here where we've got this where method. And so in order to do that, I'm just going to do SkillStruct University members age filtered is equal to what we created before. That's SkillStruct University members.where SU age is less than 30. All right, so now we have this set up. The next thing we want to do is print out the result. And the way we print out this is obviously through console.writeLine, but we need to do that in something called a for each loop. We haven't come across that, but it's very, very friendly when it comes to manipulating or displaying collections. So let's show you what I mean next. Okay, so let's create that for each loop, and it's a really simple loop to create. I'm not even going to use IntelliSense or Visual Studio to help me. So for each, and then space, and then it's open close bracket, and then the curly brackets to put the logic. And what we put here is for each, and then the type. So our type is SkillStruct University member. Then we call it a name. So we're just going to call it SkillStruct University member in, and then the name of the collection. So for us is SkillStruct University members age filtered. So that's the one that we're focusing on. And then it's basically going to loop each time for the result. And now we need to print that out to the console. And the way we do that, of course, is console.writeLine. And we're going to pass in a few things here, or a couple properties. We're not going to put every single property here. Just we want to demonstrate that it works effectively. So SkillStruct University member dot, and then we're going to pass in the username, and then just to concatenate this, we need to use that plus, and then give it a space. So just add in a space here so it doesn't come together, and then we are going to add another plus to complete the concatenation, and then we're going to add SkillStruct University member dot age. So those are the two things. Feel free to add as many as you want. I just want to show you that this works as a proof of concept. So now that we have this, let's run this next. All right, so before I actually run this solution, let me build, as we always do, the solution. All right, that's done it now, and it's built successfully. We don't have any errors, which is great. So I'm really confident running this program, there's going to be none of those errors. So we're not going to even need this catch. So there's no exceptions here. And what we're going to expect to see is out of all the collection that we have in this database, it's only going to return the username John Doe and the age, which is 20. So all going well, that should be what happens. So if I go ahead and run this program, hey presto, we have John Doe and we have the age there 20. So based on this filter here, it's basically said, hey, let's have a look at the database. We only have one thing here, one member here that is under the age of 30. So we're not going to pass this one back. We're going to pass in John Doe. And now, as you can see in our program, it's actually returned John Doe and 20. So congratulations if you have a similar screen to myself. You've basically built your first fully fledged application. Obviously, this is quite a small application. There's a lot of things you can do with applications. So you've done something which is relatively small, but at the same time, this is a fully fledged application. So congratulations on yourself if you've managed to complete this. Now let's talk about what we can add to this.
Hey everyone, Michael from SkillStruct here. I do encourage you to go back to certain segments that you've listened to previously, just to test your level of understanding. Hopefully it's improved. Hopefully there's that Oh, okay, that makes so much sense now that you've done a bit of the practical and things alike. If you're still struggling, I do encourage you to write in the comment section in particular. So maybe hopefully one of the team can reach out. But hopefully, yes, you are following along with the tutorial. You are going back retrospectively and your understanding has improved. All right, that's it from me for now. Peace.
All right, let's talk about our third and final challenge, authentication. Here you'll be combining everything you've learned so far with building the console applications, but also in the challenges, in particular independent learning. We're going to turn up the challenge meter a little bit on this one because we're going to be doing a lot of things here in this challenge, or you will be, I should say. I've already done this already. So what is the challenge? So we want you to basically take the current application as it currently stands and create a function that basically authenticates against the database we've created by checking their email and password against the database. And so some clues here is you will be needing some functions. You'll probably use a LINQ function. You don't have to, but that will definitely make your life a lot easier. You're definitely going to be enhancing some of the properties that already exist. And you're going to be using print statements, of course. So these are the things that you're going to have to do to enhance the application. There's loads of ways of doing this. You can make it very complicated. You can make it relatively simple. The difference between the last challenge and this challenge is we are going to be showing you our solution. We're not going to do it from scratch with you, but we will show you how we've done it at the end. So if you don't want to see that, make sure you don't actually play the next clip. Pause it for now and try and do this challenge for yourself. All right, so before we get into the demo itself, here are the solution steps for challenge authentication. If you already done this in a different way, that's perfectly fine and congratulations. This is just our solution steps and there are many different ways to do this. So don't feel like there's only one answer. And hopefully for those who maybe didn't go away and try it for themselves, could maybe use this solution steps as inspiration before the actual demo itself. But yes, here are the solution steps. So we first of all create a password property and added it to the SkillStruct University member class. We then updated this SkillStruct University member object with a password for each object within the SkillStruct University database class. And then within the main program, we then created a couple functions to get the username and password, and then finally verify them both against the database using LINQ's any function. Once the verification has been made, we then return it, the Boolean back to the if statement to check whether the user was successfully verified against the database. We've also then done a else, just in case the user was unable to be authenticated, just to ask the user to try again. So that is the solution steps in 5. We're now going to show you the demo incorporating the solution steps that you see here on the screen. All right, so here's the solution for the authentication challenge. So solution step 1 is to add a property to the SkillStruct University member class. So as you can see here, that's already been done. And there's already 3 references. So we're going to break this down. So all we have to do now that we've actually created a property, we need to populate that property in the SkillStruct University member object, which is in the database class, which is step 2 of the solution. So all we've simply done is we've refactored the object here and added a new property password, and then we filled out that password with SU member 1. We've also done it with property number 2 as well. All right, so now we're in our class program, and within our class program, we have the static void main that we're already familiar with. And within this, we need to make a few changes in order to resolve this solution. So what we need to do is we need a way to prompt the user for a username and password and verify it against the database. So there's a few things we need. So we need print statements, we need functions, and we need to use LINQ. So let's show you how we've done that in this solution. So if I scroll down now, you can see 2 functions here called get user email and get password. So just to click in and see what's going to go on here, I'm just clicking Control and then using my mouse to click on it, and it directs me to the function. All it's doing is basically asking the user using a print statement for their email, using that console.readLine function to read the user's input, and then returning that result back to the function that called it, storing it in this email variable, similar with password as well, doing the exact same thing. So now I'm going to go back, and then now here, once it's got that information, it does some verification. So first thing it verifies is the user email name. So all it's doing here is again, we should be familiar with this. It's creating that instance, it's creating that using the class, a new object called SkillStruct University Database. It's then getting that from the function, and then it's basically using that LINQ function called any to then check whether that email does exist and returns a Boolean. So I'm going to scroll back up, and then that's where it returns the success or not. Similar with verify password, all it's doing is again, instantiating a new object using that SkillStruct University Database class. And then it's again doing that lookup using the any LINQ function. So basically what it should be doing is it's using this password basically to see if there's an existing password using that get SkillStruct University members class that we already created in the last segment. So once it's done those verifications, it then goes through that final stage of branching. And so basically using the logic gate of AND, we use this if statement. If is branching, remember. So if user success is true and the password success is true, then what it does is essentially welcomes the user to the platform. If not, then it will jump straight here and then says there's an issue with the credentials, please try again. So those were the 5 solution steps in order to resolve the authentication. All right, so now I'm running the program. It's now asking me for my email, as we discussed before, and you can access this information just by checking the objects you create in the SkillStruct University database class. I can see here, and I'll use the first one, jd@outlook.com. Also have the password here, which I'll need soon as well. So all I'm going to do is just do a little bit of a copy and paste here. Easy enough. Okay, so to copy and paste, all you have to do is right click on within the console application. So that is my email I'm typing. Then it's the password. So I'll just replicate the same thing really. So just copy and paste the password. Again, just once I'm in the console, right click, and then I click on enter. So as you can see, success, right? You can see clearly the username is the username and the password is the password from the database as we directly copied and pasted it. And you can see that we are now on the SkillStruct platform. But you might be wondering, what happens if we put the wrong address in or the wrong password in? How would it know, or would it authenticate correctly? Let's put that to the test. So I'm going to press any key to close this window and then just run the program again. And just quite simply just put some gibberish, jargon, 1, 2, 3. We know this should not work. And there you go. There was an issue with your credentials. Please try again. And there you go. That is the solution for this particular challenge. We will be putting the solution in GitHub and we'll explain that as we wrap up where to get it from. But yeah, that was a quick demonstration of the solution for the authentication challenge. Okay, we are done with this chapter. How did you get on? Hopefully you were able to follow along. If not, do let us know any issues or concerns you do have. Let us know some feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, down below in the comment section. We're always looking to improve our products, and that's including our content. So do let us know how you got on. Any feedback will be much appreciated. Now, I did mention at the beginning and throughout the video, I will mention how you can access the source code from the last 2 particular exercises that we did. All you have to do is go to GitHub and then look for SkillStruct University.net, and .net is DOTNET. And then once you find that, you'll be able to find the 2 projects there. You'll be able to, fork the project and also just use it as your heart's content. Maybe you want to refactor it, new challenge right there. So maybe you want to improve what we have already. Not saying the code is perfect. So, feel free to create a challenge 4 and just refactor everything. And let us know if you're able to do that. We're always looking to hear how our products have impacted you. So there you have it.
that's the end of this particular chapter. I do encourage you to follow us at SkillStruct on all major social media platforms. We're always putting out new educational content, new content on technology. So I do encourage you to check us out there. Do look at our website, www.skillstruct.com as well. And if you're 18 to 13 looking to join a network like SkillStruct University, you know what you need to do. Go to www.skillstruct.com/SkillStruct University, and you'll find out all the details about how to join. Or if you're, wanting to know what's going on with SkillStruct, join our mailing list at www.skillstruct.com/join the mailing list. There you go. Simple as, right? Okay. I think that's me done with this wrap up. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We generally create these products for your benefit, and hopefully you're able to learn from these sort of tutorials, content that we do create, and you're able to take it forward. Do let us know. Keep us posted with your journey. Until the next time, SkillStruct out.
This is a SkillStruct presentation. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.